Located over here in Toronto, this is the iconic neighborhood of Yorkville. Getting right into the thick of things, making up the neighborhood's northern border over here is the quite major prominent street of Davenport Road, which winds along through the neighborhood and contains wonderfully elegant, classic boutiques on its north side, right in and around its intersection with Avenue Road. Known for their opulence and ritzy appearances, the supreme, iconic design of these reimagined assemblages makes for very nice shopping. Containing Josso's, which is a fancy seafood restaurant, and multiple art galleries, this is one of the most routine places of splurge in the city, and where many wealthy folks in particular often flock. A sizable chunk of wealthy folks live in these upscale buildings just on the other side of the street, as well as in quaint, elegant Victorian homes, which line the beautifully tree-lined, stately Hazleton Avenue. These pretty homes, with wonderful vegetation beneath mature, shady trees, and right on the footsteps of the brick front, pristine to perfection, all perhaps let off a vibe more akin to elements of a quaint, old and fancy Victorian area, despite being in the midst of one of the chicest, most in demand and at a premium locations in North America. As you get farther south along Hazleton, clothing stores such as George C. and James Purse, as well as the galleries of Murrugadar Gallery and Lot Gallery all become apparent. All of this is before you reach the Hazleton Hotel, which is pretty much the pinnacle of opulence, considering that it recently got a 5-star rating from Forbes Travel Guide, and was the only independent luxury boutique hotel in Canada to do so. The Hazleton sits on the corner with Yorkville Avenue. Charming and iconic, plush Yorkville Avenue contains a mix of establishments along its deluxe brick street, which includes extravagant, ornate living space and hotels in fancy high-rises, such as the Four Seasons Hotel and the Hazleton, which we just mentioned. Such luxury locations are surrounded by eclectic, vibrant and lavish, esteemed shops, boutiques, and restaurants sitting off the world-class, elegant strip. Grab a French bite at Café Baloo, or get a pint from the Oxley, or Japanese from Kasamoto, not to mention other places like Sophia Restaurant and Bar, Trattoria Nervosa, and One, which is in the Hazleton Hotel. When you're done with your pricey meal, maybe get a little treat at a place like Summer's Ice Cream Shop and walk along, taking in the varied elegance of everything around, with flanking trees and flower-shrouded lampposts fitting in seamlessly with the rich, artsy environment, and towering, modern buildings that lie no more than a block or so away make a beautiful backdrop. The Lumas Toronto Art Gallery sits along Yorkville Avenue, and if you're looking for designer items, you'll find that at almost every third address or so. Though some of the clothing places right along the road are 119 Corbeau, Free People, Camina Fashion, and Chanel, which is in the original location of Mount Sinai Hospital. You'll find more things of this nature along gorgeous little elegant old York Lane, where pedestrians trod along the pristine brick path, and flowers lie to either side, just below nice lights that stick out of the fronts of upscale, quaint boutique shops. Old York Lane leads down to Cumberland Street, which, although probably not as ritzy as Yorkville Avenue, which isn't saying much, nonetheless contains the diverse, eclectic, array of retail locations and often reimagined Victorian homes that is prevalent along its counterpart to the north. As well, this street has no shortage of places to shop or dine, and some of the most prized restaurants in the neighborhood, such as the New Zealand restaurant of Hemingway's, Dimmy Bar and Trattoria, and Sassafras. There's also the Sushi Inn, which I've eaten at before and would recommend. Just across the street from these shops is the sedate, tranquil village of Yorkville Park, a piece of contemporary serenity tucked away within the hustle and bustle. Formerly, this space was the occupation of Victorian row houses, but in the 50s, the homes were demolished for the Bloor subway line. A parking lot was built on ground level above the subway. A bit later, in the 70s, the city agreed to make this space into a park. However, it wasn't until the 1990s that the park was completed. Today, it is a terrific place to relax and eat a meal, or people watch and gaze at the tony, charming, affluent arrangements that are visible pretty much everywhere around. Perhaps the most popular attraction in the park is this iconic rock, which comes from the Canadian Shield. Though this area is very upscale now, it wasn't always this way. Back in the 1960s, it was a center of counterculture and hipsters, and it contributed to the careers of numerous musical talents, such as Neil Young, Buffy Sainte-Marie, Joni Mitchell, Gordon Lightfoot, and more. Yorkville was also a ground of expression in the form of writing, attracting figures such as Gwendolyn McEwen, Margaret Atwood, and Dennis Lee. Around the time of the hipsters, Toronto was primarily focused on urban renewal, and many prized structures got torn down. However, the Diamond and Myers firm bucked the trend in designing York Square, which is this iconic space at the corner of Yorkville Avenue and Avenue Road. York Square features a courtyard encircled by the directly visible buildings facing the streets with its large, circular windows. This site has to a degree set an example for an alternative view of observing the issue. A way of looking at structures as opportunities, spaces that could be added to, rather than areas in the way that had to be dismantled. Despite the precedent it set for marrying old with modern uses, York Square is not in its greatest state. And with multiple building proposals for the site, the future is uncertain. Hey everyone, a quick update. I actually went by there today, and it's actually already knocked down, and it looks like there's going to be another condo building in town. By the time the late 60s rolled in, the hipster culture gave way, and by the 70s, Yorkville was a quite different, more upscale area. Though it wasn't until the 1980s that the high-end shopping and accommodations, more akin to today, started to become the norm. Along the western border of the neighborhood, over here, is the aforementioned major street of Avenue Road, which contains a mix of things along it, including posh modernity and older buildings, which feature shops on their ground floors. There's also quite nice-looking homes turned into stores along the street. Some absolutely beautiful ones are these appealing places on the street's west side, backing onto historic residential roads which lie just outside of the neighborhood. These sites provide nice variety to the ever-present, high-end contemporary residential buildings, which, to a degree, dominate the landscape. These buildings tower above more elegant retail. Included in this retail is a Ferrari dealer, as well as Galerie de Belfoyer in Yorkville Village, which is yet another art gallery. Speaking of Yorkville Village, that's this shopping center over here. Formerly called Hazleton Lanes Shopping Center, this contemporary shopping mall, with places like Equinox, Whole Foods, Via Cavour, Andrews, Freshie, and Bois Équerre, like seemingly most things in this neighborhood, is quite upscale. It used to be significantly smaller, but then it expanded in 1988. It attracted numerous high-end businesses that, in some cases at least, just a few years later, closed their doors due in part to the recession that impacted the city during the 90s. More recently, the center was transformed again, and now it's the energetic, quite beautiful place that stands here today, making up an area that encompasses a few buildings and intricately stretching back to a sort of elegant, dynamic courtyard, which overall looks to be just a quite dazzling place. From there, the mall ventures south to its entrance along Yorkville Avenue. Avenue Road's most prominent intersection in Yorkville is with Bloor Street West, over in the southwestern corner of the neighborhood. Dominated by glitzy, gleaming high-rises that tower above esteemed stores such as Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Burberry, Sephora, COS, Roots, Moncler, Dior, and Royal de Versailles, all of which sit along the pedestrian-friendly, lively sidewalks. This elegant strip, titled Mink Mile, is the most expensive retail strip not only in Toronto, but in all of Canada, up there with being amongst the priciest in the entire world. Yorkville Avenue, by the way, is in the top 5 for most pricey retail strips in the country. Just thought I'd throw that in. Quintessentially vibrant and with classy charm, this famous Bloor Street area, pretty much the epitome of prosperity in the city and in Yorkville, is a primary center of city life and the chosen destination of multimillionaires, cultured window shoppers, and odd walkers alike, gazing at the overwhelming array of towering, posh structures which gleam from above. One development here of note is The One, which is this structure. When completed, it is set to be the tallest building in all of Canada. This structure sits right at the extremely prominent, famous intersection of Bloor and Yonge Street, which is right smack dab in the heart of Toronto, and arguably is the most significant meeting of streets in the whole city. If you venture on Bloor Street east of Yonge, you'll reach the grand, unmistakable Manulife head office, which is the head office of the largest insurance company in Canada, and one of the largest in the world. Opened in the mid-1920s, this stately, distinctly elegant heritage building, constructed with limestone, is probably one of the most beautiful buildings in the city, and makes for gorgeous viewing from its position in the midst of nicely manicured vegetation. Yonge Street stretches north of there in the neighborhood, and, as with a decent amount of the area, is near new developments, which include the under-construction 11 condo along its intersection with Yorkville Avenue, and Milan condos on Yonge and Church Street. There's also the striking 1 Yorkville building, which is still relatively new. The historic Charles Frogley building, which is a somewhat notable heritage building, lies along Yonge and Yorkville Avenue. These arrangements sit adjacent to the Toronto Reference Library, which, designed by the famous Raymond Moriyama, and opened in its current location in 1977, is the largest and most visited library branch in the Toronto system, one of, if not the busiest library systems on the planet. This notable library, spanning 5 floors, has a quite gorgeous, distinct, intricate layout to it, with the design influenced by the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It contains dynamic, visible floors, which are dominated by an ever-present atrium that lies overhead. All of this was displayed in The Weeknd's Secrets music video. The reference library features a plethora of different sections to it, which include a digital information hub that features 3D printing, the TD Gallery, which is the primary exhibit space in the library, study pods, the Bram and Bluma Appel Salon, the Norman G. Hinton Learning Center, the Writer's Room, the Jack Rabinovich Reading Room, and the Marilyn and Charles Bailey Special Collections Center features access to the Baldwin Collection of Canada, which is a quite extensive research collection with an emphasis on Canadian history, the Chinese Canadian Archive, reflecting the Chinese Canadian community, the Special Collections in the Arts, Music, Dance Theatre, which includes rare programs and sheet music, photographs, manuscripts, prints, engravings, and posters, as well as stage designs, and, perhaps most prominently, the Arthur Conan Doyle Collection, which contains an extensive collection devoted to Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes. When I was there last, 2 areas that I found neat were the elevators that look somewhat like pills, which you can see out of, and the ceiling-to-floor windows on the 5th floor, which provide a nice view looking north onto Church Street. Speaking of Church Street, which we mentioned previously, that's this street over here, which begins at Yonge as a continuation of Davenport Road. It winds along a short distance through the neighborhood until it reaches Bloor Street along the southern border of Yorkville. The street's intersection with Bloor is a quite prime intersection indeed, and in its northwest corner is made up by this quite beautiful building. In between Bloor and Yonge, just along Little Collier Street, right near Church Street, is 1000 Towns of Canada, which is a neat attraction. There's also this building along Church Street, which curves in accordance with the road, and which I've always found a little striking, as it provides stark contrast to the buildings further west. This sits right at Church's intersection with Park Road, which, stretching north, in and around the continuation of Collier Street, contains a quite sublime array of charming Victorian homes, which appear rather elegantly tucked away, despite their busy location. Circling back to Yonge Street now, along it just on the north side of its intersection with Church is the site of one of the original Canadian Tire stores, which is one of the largest retail chains in the entire country, and to this day retains this extremely desirable location. Just across the street from the Canadian Tire is the gorgeous, historic building known as the Masonic Temple, which, made for the purposes of Freemasonry, has hosted numerous shows and events in the concert hall in the past, with celebrities including Led Zeppelin, Chuck Berry, Frank Sinatra, the Rolling Stones, the Tragically Hip, Weird Al Yankovic, and the Animals, among others. Now, another very major, significant street in Yorkville is Bay Street, right here, just west of Yonge, which has an immaculate array of modern, dignified high-rises along it. This street, with a consistent stream of traffic along its wide roadway, is among the most prominent thoroughfares in the core of downtown. This is apparent when you see the towering buildings, making for a stunning view ahead. Scollard Street sits just off Bay and stretches a relatively small distance east and west of the road, between Yonge and Hazleton Avenue. Akin to Hazleton, it's the location of nice and stylish, quaint places, which house both families and stores such as the Webster and the Paragon Fine Arts Art Gallery. Because, you can never have too many art galleries. This street is just south of Jesse Ketchum Park and Jesse Ketchum Junior and Senior Public School, which contains a field that I played on in the past. Just north of the park and school is the beautiful residential street of Berryman Street, which is the location of more fancy, decadent homes. One of the homes along the street has been listed for $7.5 million, so those are the kind of figures we're dealing with here. Some other fashionable avenues worth noting are Bishop Street, Hillsborough Avenue, and Webster Avenue. There's also Belmont Street, which runs from Davenport to Yonge, after which it continues on in the form of Aylmer Avenue, a very different kind of street. Aylmer Avenue, making up a border of the neighborhood, crosses over the Yonge Street subway before it sharply dips into the lush Rosedale Ravine and becomes Rosedale Valley Road, which stretches along through the valley with pretty much no intervals. This ravine that Rosedale Valley Road runs right through the core of, an urban escape bordering downtown, makes the street certainly one of the cooler ones in the city. This ravine effectively acts as somewhat of a divider between mightily affluent Rosedale and downtown. There's more to this ravine, but we'll save that for when we discuss surrounding neighborhoods. Rosedale Valley Road goes on until Mount Pleasant Road in the neighborhood, which makes up Yorkville's eastern border over here and goes over Rosedale Valley Road via a bridge. Otherwise, other general places worth noting in the neighborhood include Church of the Redeemer, the Sullivan Entertainment Studio on Davenport Road, this beautiful fire station, which sits on Yorkville Avenue, the Yorkville branch of the Toronto Public Library, which is right next door to the fire station, and was one of the city's libraries that was financed by Andrew Carnegie, Cumberland Terrace, which is a shopping mall near Bloor and Yonge, and the Studio Building, which, built over a century ago and financed by Dr. James McCallum and Lauren Harris, was used by numerous prominent artists, with members of the renowned Group of Seven, among others, utilizing the building. Some parks that we didn't mention yet include Harold Town Park, Asquith Green Park, Mist Garden, which is beside the Four Seasons Hotel and is precisely what it sounds like, Milner Parquet, Lauren Harris Park, Belmont Parquet, and Town Hall Square. Finally, some schools or education institutions in the neighborhood that we have yet to mention are Oxford College of Arts, Business and Technology, ILAC International College, McDonald International Academy, and the Dalton School, which operates in both English and Mandarin. Well then, that pretty much wraps up Yorkville. In conclusion, from quaint, stylish homes to gorgeous public spaces to chic shopping strips which sit amongst the towering buildings that occupy some of the priciest land in the country, Whether you're looking to stock up your wardrobe with the finest designer items in town, splurge at an exquisite, eclectic restaurant, or just get some work done at the city's most famous library, centrally located Yorkville really has it all.